Kill the fat one first. Outlaws chose obese hostage to murder. Mountain man's reaction. Kill the fat one first. She'll be the hardest to drag later. The words dropped into the mountain's silence like a death sentence. The stagecoach had already been emptied, its 6 passengers forced into a kneeling line beside the road, while 5 masked outlaws rifled through bags and smashed open the iron strong-box. The horses snorted nervously, the wind cut cold through autumn coats, and dust still hung in the air where the coach had skidded to a stop. Della Mason knelt at the far end of the line, skirts crushed beneath her, heart thundering so hard she could hear her pulse in her ears. At 26 and nearly 200 kilograms, she took up more space than anyone else, and in the eyes of the world, that meant she also took up more blame. "Look at her," one outlaw said, jerking his chin toward her. "She'll slow us down, eat twice what anyone else does, and nobody's gonna miss her back home. Do the smart thing, boss. Kill the fat one first and leave her for the coyotes." Before we go further, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from right now? And if you've ever been judged for how you look, stay with this story until the end. Around Della, the other passengers stared studiously at the ground. Edgar Mitchell, the banker from Denver, gripped his wife's hand so hard her knuckles whitened, but said nothing. Constance Mitchell, thin and sharp as a pin, glared at Della with open resentment. The Reverend Thomas Whitmore whispered a frantic prayer under his breath, while his frail mother trembled beside him. Lily Chen, the young school teacher, had tears on her cheeks, but kept her lips pressed tightly shut. No one spoke for Della. "Please," Della managed, her voice breaking, "you don't have to do this. Take whatever you want. Take me as a hostage if you must, but don't—" "Listen to her," another outlaw snorted, already trying to bargain with the only thing she's got, more body than sense. "She probably broke the coach springs," Constance muttered under her breath. "If it weren't for her slowing us down, maybe they wouldn't have picked this coach at all." Shame burned hotter than fear in Della's chest. She had spent her life trying to make herself small, eating less in public, ducking her head in crowds, apologizing just for existing. But in this moment, on this lonely stretch of road between Silver City and Fort Collins, Colorado territory, she was too big to ignore and too easy to sacrifice. The outlaw leader, tall, broad-shouldered, red bandana over his face, rested his rifle lazily on his shoulder and studied her like a butcher eyeing livestock. "One dead body sends a strong message," he mused. "And she's right. We could use the others as hostages if the law comes sniffing." Della's stomach twisted. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and gunpowder. Somewhere in the tree line, a bird shrieked and went silent. The leader raised his rifle, sighting down the barrel at her chest. And then a calm, unfamiliar voice drifted from the shadows of the pines. "Lower your gun. You shoot that woman, and you'll be dead before her body hits the ground." Every head snapped toward the trees as a gigantic man stepped out of the forest, rifle already leveled, gray eyes hard as hammered steel. "Name's Matthias Kane," he said quietly. "Some folks call me the Wolf. And today, boys, you're done hurting people who never lifted a hand against you." For a moment, the mountain road fell utterly silent, as if even the wind were holding its breath. 5 outlaws, 6 terrified passengers, 1 raised rifle, and a stranger who seemed carved from the wilderness itself. Matthias Caney stood at the edge of the clearing, half shadowed by the pines. Even at a distance, he dominated the space, 6 feet 8, built like the trunk of an old-growth cedar, dressed in worn buckskin patched countless times by his own hand. His face was weathered, cut with old scars, but his eyes, pale gray, sharp, unblinking, held the focus of a hunter who never missed. The outlaws reacted with predictable stupidity. One grabbed for his pistol. Matthias shifted a single inch, barely more than a twitch of his shoulder. His rifle cracked once, clean and decisive. The outlaw howled and dropped his gun, clutching a hand now marked by a deep grazing wound. "That," Matthias said calmly, still aiming straight at the leader, "was me being polite." The leader cursed, raising both hands. All right. No need for—" "There is," Matthias interrupted. "There's a need for you to drop your rifle and take 3 steps back unless you want to end your day faster than you planned." The man obeyed. The passengers remained frozen on the ground, still kneeling. Some trembled, some prayed. And Della Mason, the woman the outlaws had chosen as their convenient first kill, tried to stop her breathing from spiraling into panic. Her dress clung uncomfortably to her body, fabric straining across her hips and belly. She had always been aware of her size. She couldn't remember a day in her 26 years when the world allowed her to forget it. But today, under the mocking eyes of criminals and the thinly veiled disgust of her fellow travelers, the shame felt suffocating. She had imagined dying before. Every time someone snapped a chair under her, every time she overheard a whispered comment, every time a stranger laughed at her for daring to be in public. But she had never imagined it would be this literal, this swift, executed on a roadside because she was an inconvenience. And then Matthias Caney appeared, a man who looked as though he belonged in myths or nightmares, not among ordinary mortals. He approached slowly now, boots crunching gravel, rifle never wavering. When he reached the passengers, he stopped directly in front of Della. "You hurt?" he asked. She blinked, startled. No, just scared." "Good, means you're alive." His tone softened barely, almost imperceptibly. "Stay put." Everyone else would have moved on immediately, as though checking on her was unnecessary courtesy. But Matthias looked at her a second longer, assessing not her size, not her shame, but whether she was safe. He turned to the other passengers. Edgar Mitchell wiped sweat from his brow. "Sir, thank heaven you arrived when you did." Lily Chen nodded vigorously. "We'd all be dead without you." Constance Mitchell, however, tightened her lips. "It was reckless of these men to attack us, yes, but it was her fault they picked this coach. The weight slowed us down." Matthias glanced at her, expression cooling several degrees. "Ma'am, if you'd like to complain about something, complain to the outlaws with the guns, not the woman who's just trying to get home." Constance flushed. Edgar shushed her with a whisper. Reverend Whitmore cleared his throat. "Sir, may we stand?" "In a minute," Matthias said. "Let's finish disarming these idiots first." Under Matthias's instructions, concise, calm, absolute, the passengers helped bind the outlaw's hands with rope from his saddlebag. Not once did he raise his voice. Not once did he falter. His authority was the kind forged in battlefields and lonely wildernesses, the kind that needed no shouting to be obeyed. Della watched him from where she knelt. Her breath had steadied, but her heart hadn't. Not from fear anymore, but from the strange, overwhelming relief tumbling through her. She had spent her life knowing She would never be anyone's first choice, not for kindness, not for help, not for anything. And yet, here was this man who had appeared from the shadows like judgment itself, lifting the rifle off her life and placing it onto the men who had marked her as expendable. When the last outlaw was tied and the road was quiet, Matthias finally crouched beside Della, bringing his giant frame down to her level. "Can you stand?" he asked. "Yes." She nodded quickly, embarrassed by how her voice shook. He extended a hand, large, calloused, steady. She hesitated. People had offered her hands before, only to snatch them away as a cruel joke. But Matthias waited with no impatience, no mockery. She put her hand in his. He pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. For the first time since the robbery began, she felt the ground beneath her stop, swaying. "You're safe now," he said. Simple words, quiet. But for her, they cut deeper than any gunshot. Matthias didn't linger on the admiration that rippled through the passengers, nor on the glares Constance Mitchell shot at Della every few minutes. Once the outlaws were tied, stripped of weapons, and loaded into the stagecoach under guard, he turned to business. "You folks continue to Fort Collins," he instructed Edgar Mitchell, who held a pistol like it was a quill he'd never learned to use. "Sheriff Harrison in Silver City expects these men. I'll ride ahead and clear the road." Edgar nodded shakily. "We'll manage. Thank you, Mr. Kane." Matthias turned to Della. His pale eyes softened slightly. "You live in Silver City?" "Yes," she said, smoothing her wrinkled, dust-streaked dress. "Hanson's Bakery. I'm their baker." Matthias nodded as though that detail mattered to him. "Then ride with me. My spare mare can carry you steady. You don't need to be stuck in that coach with folks who didn't defend you when it counted." The remark was pointed enough that Constance flinched. Della hesitated, a lifetime's worth of habit telling her she didn't deserve special treatment. But riding with Matthias meant avoiding the whispers she knew would fill the coach. If it's not too much trouble." "It's not," he said firmly. He helped her mount the mare. His hands were steady, respectful. No grunt of effort, no sigh of impatience, none of the cruel jokes she'd endured her entire life. Just care. The two riders, Della on the mare, Matthias on his black gelding, set off ahead of the stagecoach. The autumn afternoon stretched gold around them, pine shadows long across the earth, the road winding through ridges and slopes carved by old rivers. At first, they rode in silence, the kind that was comfortable, not awkward. Della kept expecting him to look at her with the same curious judgment the world always gave her. He didn't. Matthias scanned the woods instead, ears tuned to danger, rifle tied across his saddle where he could unhook it in a heartbeat. He moved like a man with purpose, with skill carved into every muscle. "You must be used to this," she finally said. "Danger, hunting criminals, saving people." "Used to it," Matthias replied without bragging. "Comes with the work." "Do you like the work?" He considered. "I like stopping bad men. More than that, I like making sure folks who don't deserve suffering don't have to face it alone." Della swallowed. "Then why help me? None of the others thought I was worth—" "None of the others," Matthias interrupted, saw with clear eyes. She blinked. "What do you mean?" He kept his focus on the trail ahead. A person's worth isn't in their weight, or their size, or how quick they move. It's in how they carry themselves through hardship. You didn't beg those men to spare others. You didn't try to buy your way out. You didn't cause trouble. You just stayed quiet and ready to face whatever came. "No one's ever called that strength," Della whispered. "Then no one knew what they were looking at," Matthias said. The words warmed her more than the sun on her back. As they rode, Matthias broke branches at key turns, marking the trail for the approaching stagecoach. He pointed out animal tracks, showing Della how to tell cougar prints from wolf prints. He explained the terrain, how the late autumn storms would hit soon, how the river could swell overnight, how the mountains listened better than most men did. She found herself smiling. "You talk to the mountains like they're old friends." "They've saved my life enough times," he said lightly. They stopped once near a stream so clear it reflected the sky like a mirror. Matthias dismounted first and held his hand to her again to help her down, steadying her as though her weight didn't intimidate him at all. He filled his canteen, then hers. He broke a piece of dried meat in half and offered it without hesitation, without calculation about portion size, without judgment. She stared at the food in her palm, overwhelmed. "You don't have to give me—" "You were robbed too," he said simply, "and you rode hard today. Eat." She ate. It felt like the first time food had ever been offered to her without strings attached. As they continued toward Silver City, clouds gathered, streaking gray across the sky. The scent of rain deepened. Matthias checked the horizon. "We'll reach town before the storm," he said. Della nodded, though the thought of reaching town made her strangely nervous. Because when they reached town, would this connection, this safety, evaporate? Matthias glanced over then, something unreadable in his expression. "You did well today." "I did nothing," Della said. "You saved us all." "I meant you held yourself with courage," he replied. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. No one had ever spoken of her courage. No one had ever acknowledged her worth. Not like this. By the time Silver City appeared in the distance, its modest rooftops glowing amber in the last stretch of sunlight, Della no longer felt like the same woman the outlaws had tried to kill. She felt seen. She felt safe. And she had no idea just how deeply Matthias Caney would change her life. The rainstorm hit Silver City just as the sun dipped behind the ridge. Townsfolk hurried into saloons and shops, pulling shutters tight against the wind. Matthias didn't follow the stagecoach into town. Instead, he led Della down a side road that wound behind the livery and out toward the open valley. "Where are we going?" she asked, tightening her cloak. "My place," Matthias answered. "Sheriff's men will handle the prisoners. You don't need to stand in a crowded office answering questions for the next 3 hours." Della hesitated. People didn't invite her places, not unless they needed heavy lifting or wanted her out of the way. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I don't want to be a bother." Matthias glanced back at her, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Della, if I didn't want you there, I wouldn't have asked." He said it so simply that it stunned her into silence. The path curved through tall pines until a cabin came into view. Solid timbers, smoke curling from the chimney, windows glowing with warm lamplight. Not extravagant, not imposing, just welcoming. Her throat tightened. "This is yours?" she asked softly. "Built it myself," Matthias said. "A place quiet enough for a man to think. Or try to." He dismounted, tied his horse, and helped Della down. He didn't flinch at her weight, didn't grunt, didn't make a joke. He simply steadied her, warm hand closing around hers as if guiding her to safety was second nature to him. Inside, the cabin was warmer than she expected, lit by a fire that filled the room with soft orange glow. A cooking pot simmered on the stone hearth, filling the air with the rich scent of venison stew. A wide table sat to one side, a bookshelf to another, and a sturdy bed was tucked into the corner behind a partition wall. Matthias hung his hat and coat, then turned to her. "You're soaked. Sit by the fire." "But—" "Sit," he said gently, not as a command, but as an assurance. She obeyed. Heat soaked into her bones, driving out the cold that had lived in her ever since the outlaws dragged her from the stagecoach. Matthias ladled stew into 2 bowls, placing one in her hands before settling onto the chair across from her. "Eat," he said. "You've had a day no one should have." She hesitated only a moment before tasting the stew. It was delicious, rich, hearty, perfectly seasoned. She blinked in surprise. "You cook?" "When you live alone this long, you learn," Matthias said. "But don't expect fancy, just practical." "I think it's wonderful," Della murmured. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. High praise coming from a baker. They ate in comfortable silence. Rain drummed softly on the roof. The fire crackled when the wind pushed through the chimney. For the first time since the robbery, Della's hands stopped trembling. When they finished, Matthias took the bowls to the basin, washed them quickly, then returned to the fire. He gestured toward the small door near the back. "That room's yours tonight. Bed's clean. You'll rest better there than upstairs with old draft boards." She stared at him. "You're giving me your only guest room?" He shrugged. "Safer than sending you to a boarding house in this storm, and I don't leave people outside after they've been hunted." Della swallowed hard. "Matthias, you barely know me." "Know enough," he said simply. "You're good at heart, and you deserve a warm place to breathe after what those men said." Her breath hitched. No man, not one, had ever spoken to her that way. Matthias crouched beside the fire to add a fresh log. The glow sharpened the angles of his face, scar along his cheekbone, thick lashes casting shadows over his pale eyes, jaw tense not with anger now, but with something gentler, something protective. He looked up at her. "Della? Yes? You're safe here?" Her eyes stung. She pressed her hands together to keep them from shaking. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Matthias frowned as though the question puzzled him. "Because kindness is what keeps a person human," he said, "and because you've had too damn little of it for too damn long." The dam broke. A quiet tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't usually cry." "You've earned a few tears," he murmured, "after the day you had." He stood, moving to the cabinet, and returned holding a folded wool garment. "Here," he said. "Dry clothes? Coat's too big for you, but it's warm." Her voice cracked. "Thank you." He nodded once and stepped toward the door. "I'll be outside splitting wood for a bit." "Take your time." When he left, Della was alone with the fire and her own heart. She changed into the warm wool shirt and felt the heat cling to her skin. Her reflection in the window surprised her. Tired, yes, but something else too. Something softer. Something hopeful. She drifted around the room, brushing her fingers over Matthias's carved wooden figurines, his carefully arranged tools, the books stacked near his chair. Everything in the cabin felt lived in, built with hands that had known loss and carved their way toward survival anyway. When Matthias returned, shirt damp from rain, hair dripping, carrying an armload of split logs, He paused in the doorway, not because she was in his shirt, not because she looked different, but because she looked up at him and smiled, a small, tentative, grateful smile, and something in his expression shifted, quietly, deeply, almost imperceptibly. "Feeling warmer?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Thanks to you." Matthias set the logs down and leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "Good. Didn't want you shivering through the night." Della hesitated. Then, mustering courage, she asked, "Does anyone else live here? Any family?" His gaze lowered, shadows passing through the pale gray. "Not anymore." A beat of silence. Della bowed her head. "I'm sorry. Truly." Matthias shifted, exhaling slowly. "Some losses stay sharp, but sometimes someone comes along who reminds you the world isn't all bad." Her pulse fluttered. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Della felt like she wasn't too much, like she wasn't a burden, like this towering, scarred, quiet man saw something inside her no one else had looked long enough to notice. As the fire crackled and rain softened into a gentle patter, Della felt the warmth seep into places inside her she'd thought frozen for good. And for the first time in her life, she wondered, softly, fearfully, beautifully, if someone like Matthias Kane could ever feel something more for someone like her. By the time the storm clouds finally thinned over Silver City, the story of the wolf and the fat baker had already spread through town like spilled flour. Della returned to Hanson's bakery 2 days after the robbery. The bell over the door jingled, the familiar smell of yeast and sugar wrapped around her, and for a brief, glorious moment, life felt almost normal again. "About damn time you came back," old Mr. Hanson grumbled from behind the counter. His tone was rough, but his eyes shone with unmistakable relief. "Customers keep asking when the only person who can bake a decent brioche is coming back. I'm tired of lying." Della laughed, tension breaking. "I'll start a double batch." Word of the robbery, the near execution, and Matthias Kane's intervention reached town before she did. Customers leaned over glass cases to ask for details in hushed, fascinated tones. "Is it true they wanted to kill you first, Miss Mason?" "Did you really stare down 5 guns?" "Is the wolf really as big as they say?" Della answered what she could, glossed over what hurt too much, and tried to keep her hand steady as she shaped loaves and braided dough. Every time the door opened, her heart flickered, not with fear anymore, but with a strange new anticipation. He came 3 days later. The bell chimed, and Matthias Kane ducked his head to step through the door, somehow making the little bakery feel even smaller. He held his hat in his hands, shoulders slightly hunched, as if not to intimidate the room. Conversation dipped. Every eye turned to him. "Morning," he said, voice low. Mr. Hanson straightened. "You the one they call Wolf?" Matthias's mouth twitched. "Some do." "Then you're eating free as long as you're in my town," Hanson declared. "Anyone who stops men like that is welcome in my shop." Matthias shook his head. "I pay for what I eat." His gaze slid to the back counter, where Della stood frozen, flour on her hands, heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. When their eyes met, something in his expression changed, softened. "Afternoon, Della," he said quietly. "Smells good in here." "Apple pies just came out of the oven," she managed. "And cinnamon rolls." He smiled, a small private curve of his lips like he was holding the rest of it back for her alone. "Then I stopped in at the right time." He came back the next day, and the next. Sometimes he stayed for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He'd sit at the corner table, massive hands cradling a chipped mug of coffee, listening as she talked about the bakery, about strange customers, about the way dough changed with the weather. In return, he told her pieces of his own story, how he'd been a scout during the war, how his wife and little boy had died of fever while he was away on a hunt, how silence had become both a refuge and a prison afterward. "I hear things out there," he said once, staring at the window streaked with afternoon light. "People plotting robberies, planning ambushes. I stop what I can. Doesn't bring my family back, but it keeps someone else from losing theirs." "You've saved more people than you know," Della said softly, "including me." The more time they spent together, the more something quiet and steady settled between them. Not the feverish infatuation of dime novel romances, but a trust that grew like yeast in warm water, slow, invisible at first, then rising until it changed everything it touched. Silver City noticed. Some were delighted. "About time that girl finds someone who sees her," Mrs. Lopez, the laundress, whispered to her husband. "He looks at her like she hung the moon." Others were not. Constance Mitchell arrived one Saturday, sweeping into the bakery like a winter draft. She had recovered quickly from the robbery. Wealth and entitlement made resilience easier. She ordered coffee and a slice of the most expensive cake, then leaned across the counter. "Miss Mason," she said, voice sweet enough to rot teeth, "I hear you've been entertaining our mysterious wolf rather often." Della kept her tone polite. "He buys coffee like everyone else." Constance's eyes glittered. "Men like that don't buy coffee for everyone else. They buy it for women who know how to make themselves useful." The implication hit like a slap. "I bake," Della replied, jaw tightening. "That's my usefulness." Constance smiled thinly. "Don't pretend you don't know what people are saying. The wolf could have taken anyone as his companion, yet he keeps returning to you. Some say it's noble. I say it's curious." "Curious?" Della repeated. "Criminals and misfits attract each other," Constance murmured. "And really, what kind of decent woman rides alone to a strange man's cabin? There are words for women like that, Miss Mason. Weight doesn't hide them." The words sliced through the soft armor Della had been building. Old fears roared back. Fear of being seen as desperate, ridiculous, unworthy. Matthias entered the bakery 20 seconds later. He took in the scene in one glance. Constance leaning over the counter, Della pale and stiff, his eyes chilled. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said evenly, "I didn't expect to see you here." Constance straightened, forcing a smile. "Mr. Kane, I was just complimenting Miss Mason on her courage." Matthias stepped closer. "Does courage now sound like an insult in Denver society, or only when you say it?" Color flared in her cheeks. "I was only concerned for her reputation. A woman in her position must be careful. People talk." "Let them," Matthias said. "Their words say more about them than about her." Constance's eyes flashed. "Careful, Wolf. You may tame outlaws, but you won't tame gossip." She swept out, skirts rustling, leaving the faint scent of perfume and poison behind. Della busied herself with the nearest tray, hands shaking. Matthias watched her for a long moment. "What did she say?" he asked quietly. "Nothing," Della lied. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he said. "If it shook you like that." She swallowed. "People will think I'm foolish for spending time with you, for hoping for anything with someone like you." "Someone like me?" His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? You're strong, she blurted. Respected, legendary even, and I'm... She gestured helplessly to her body. I'm the woman everyone chooses to sacrifice first. People will say you pity me, that you're only here out of obligation, that I trapped you somehow, that I should be grateful for scraps of your attention and never ask for more. The words tumbled out, hot and bitter, years of humiliation compressed into one trembling confession. Matthias was silent for several heartbeats. Then he stepped around the counter, closing the space between them until the warmth of him blocked out every draft. Della, look at me. She forced her gaze up. I don't give a damn what this town whispers, he said. Let them choke on their own words. Let them decide I'm too good for you or you're not good enough for me. They're wrong, either way. His voice lowered, every word deliberate. I come here because in all the years I've spent tracking men through wilderness, I have never met anyone with more backbone than you. You were willing to die with dignity on that road. You were willing to walk back into a town that once laughed at you. And you still choose kindness when the world throws cruelty in your face. He drew a slow breath. I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because I want to be. Because when I'm not in this bakery, I'm thinking about when I can be. That's the truth. You can believe it or not, but don't you dare let their poison drown it out. Tears blurred her vision. And if that makes your life harder? He smiled then, small, dangerous, almost amused. I've been shot at, knifed, starved, frozen, and left for dead. Loving someone like you would be the easiest fight I ever chose. The word slipped out before either of them could catch it. Loving. Silence pressed in. Della's heart stumbled. You love? He cursed softly under his breath. That was not how I meant to say it. The bell over the door chimed again, abruptly, rudely, and Sheriff Harrison strode in, hat dripping rain, eyes serious. Caney, Miss Mason, we need to talk, he said. Those outlaws you brought in, they weren't working alone, and their friends just rode into town asking questions. He looked between them, face grim. They're asking about the wolf, he said, and about the fat woman he saved. Sheriff Harrison's warning hit the bakery like a slammed door. Della felt the air thin around her, the scent of cinnamon and warm bread suddenly swallowed by the cold reality of danger creeping toward them again. Matthias straightened slowly, the shift in him immediate and unmistakable. One moment he had been a man standing inches from the woman he loved. The next he was the wolf, scarred, calculating, dangerous. How many? He asked. 3 riders confirmed, Harrison said. But the way folks saw 'em fan out, I'd wager 5 or 6. Some say they've been asking who the big woman is, the one who should have been left dead on the road. Della's blood ran cold. They're coming for you, Miss Mason, the sheriff added gently, for revenge, and maybe for leverage. Matthias didn't let her absorb that fear alone. He stepped closer, his large hand steady on her back. They won't touch you, he said. Not while I'm breathing. Harrison nodded grimly. I figured you'd say that. But we need a plan. If they're itching for a fight, they'll hit the bakery or your cabin first. The bakery's too crowded, Matthias said immediately. Too many people could get caught in the crossfire. So what do you intend to do? Harrison asked. Matthias's jaw worked as he thought. Take her somewhere defensible, somewhere with 1 entrance, 1 exit, and solid walls. The cabin, Della whispered. He nodded. My cabin. Della looked between them, heart hammering. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Matthias turned to her fully, steel in his voice. This isn't your fault. This is theirs, and it ends today. Within minutes, he had her cloak wrapped around her, his horse saddled, provisions strapped in place. He lifted her onto the mare's back with effortless strength, his hands firm but gentle, as if afraid she might shatter. As they rode out of town, the sky dimmed. Wind swept across the valley, carrying the smell of pine and something darker. Danger on the move. Inside the cabin, Matthias moved with precision. He closed shutters, bolted doors, loaded rifles, and set extra ammunition within reach. Della helped where she could, fetching water, gathering blankets, pushing furniture against vulnerable spots. But when Matthias saw her trembling hands, he paused. Della, he murmured, stepping close, look at me. She forced her eyes up. Fear doesn't make you weak. It means you see the truth. But you're not alone in this. Her words broke on a whisper. I'm scared they'll hurt you because of me. I've walked into worse odds for strangers, he said. I'll gladly do it again for the woman He swallowed, voice tightening. For the woman I refuse to lose. Thunder rumbled across the valley, not from the sky, but from the earth. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, getting closer. Della froze. They found us. Matthias moved to the window, rifle in hand. Stay behind the bed. Don't move unless I tell you. The hoofbeats stopped outside the cabin. Silence followed, unnatural, heavy, humming with threat. Then a voice shouted from outside, ugly and familiar. Wolf, we know you're in there. Bring out the fat one. We got a score to settle. Della flinched. Matthias's face hardened into something lethal. Listen close, Caney, another outlaw yelled. We ain't leaving without her. She dies for what you did. Matthias stepped to the door, voice cold as frost. If you want her, you'll have to step over my corpse, and I'm not planning on dying today. Gunfire exploded outside, shots cracking, bullets slamming into the cabin walls, wood splintered, glass shattered. Della crouched behind the bed, hands over her ears, praying under her breath. Matthias returned fire with deadly precision. 2 shots, a grunt outside, the thud of a body hitting the dirt. You boys picked the wrong cabin, Matthias growled. The outlaws regrouped behind trees and rocks, trading curses and bullets. Smoke thickened. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Della's heartbeat pounded loud enough to drown the world. At one point, silence fell. A pause, too sharp, too intentional. Then she heard it. Footsteps at the back wall. A whispered order. Someone trying to flank the cabin. Matthias hadn't heard it. He was reloading by the front window. Without thinking, Della moved. She crawled to the rear door, pressed her ear to the wood, heard the outlaw's ragged breath inches away. Her hands shook, but her grip tightened around the cast-iron skillet she'd grabbed from the hearth. When the door jerked open, she swung. The skillet struck the outlaw square in the face. He dropped with a howl, gun tumbling from his hand. Matthias spun toward the noise and froze when he saw her standing there, chest heaving, skillet raised again. Della, he breathed, stunned, you just saved my life. She managed a shaky smile. Figured I should contribute. Before he could answer, another shot rang out, but this one from farther away. Then a familiar voice bellowed across the clearing, Sheriff's office, drop your weapons. Harrison had arrived with 4 deputies. Outnumbered, outgunned, the remaining outlaws threw down their weapons. Silence descended. Smoke drifted. Matthias lowered his rifle slowly. Then he turned to Della, and his expression, astonishment, pride, fierce tenderness, made her knees nearly buckle. "Della Mason," he said softly, "you're braver than any man I've fought beside." She swallowed hard. "I didn't want you to face them alone." "You didn't," he murmured. "You stood with me, and I'll never forget it." The cabin, still smoky and splintered, suddenly felt very small, very safe, very theirs. When the last outlaw was hauled away in shackles and the deputies rode back toward town, the valley fell quiet again. The only sounds were the soft creak of pine trees and the distant rush of water down the ravine. Smoke drifted lazily from the cabin roof, curling around broken shutters in the splintered door. Inside, Della swept shards of glass from the floor while Matthias set his rifle aside and knelt beside her. "Don't," he said gently. "You've done enough for one day." "I needed something to do with my hands," she whispered. "Otherwise, I'll start shaking." He took the broom from her and leaned it against the wall, then reached for her hands. They were cold, trembling slightly. He wrapped them in his much larger ones and held them as if they were something precious. "You saved me," he murmured. "You understand that, right? If that man had slipped in behind me, if you hadn't heard him—" He shook his head. "You kept me alive." Her throat tightened. I couldn't let them hurt you because of me." Matthias lifted her chin so their eyes met. "They didn't come because of you," he said. "They came because of me, because I stopped them, because I stood between them and what they wanted." His voice lowered, steady and certain. "And I'd do it again, every time." Della swallowed hard. "Even if it puts you in danger?" "Especially then." The fire popped softly in the hearth. A warm glow spread through the cabin, wrapping both of them in amber light. Matthias brushed a thumb over her knuckles, slowly, reverently. "You asked once why I kept coming back to the bakery," he said. "I didn't answer you then." "You said the pie was good," she whispered, trying for a smile. He huffed a quiet laugh. "It is, but that's not why." The humor faded from his face, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "I came back because you make the world feel gentler," he said, "because when I sit across from you, the noise in my head quiets, because when you laugh, it feels like I've been starving for that sound without knowing it." Della's breath caught. "And because when I look at you," he finished softly, "I see someone worth choosing, worth fighting for, worth hoping for." Hope. The word settled in her chest like warm sunlight, easing wounds she had carried her entire life. She reached up, her fingers trembling, and touched his cheek. A soft scrape of stubble brushed her skin. Real, solid, grounding. "Matthias," she whispered, "are you asking me to stay?" He held her gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then he nodded. "If you want this place to be your home," he said, voice low and sincere, "it's yours. If you want me, I'm yours too." Tears filled her eyes, not of pain this time, but of something far deeper. "No one's ever asked me that," she whispered. "Not really, not without shame or pity attached." "I don't pity you," Matthias said. "I admire you." Della let out a shaky breath. "Then yes, if you'll have me, I want to stay." Matthias's expression softened into something almost unbearably tender. "Good," he murmured, "because I don't want to imagine this cabin without your laughter in it." Outside, the last of the storm clouds drifted away, revealing a sky streaked with gold and pale blue. Inside, The fire crackled warmly as Matthias pulled Della into a quiet, steady embrace. Two people who had been told all their lives that they didn't deserve tenderness, finally finding it in each other. Their future wasn't certain. The world was still hard. There would be whispers, judgments, challenges ahead. But for now, just for this moment, the cabin glowed with a promise stronger than fear. She was safe. He was home. And something new and fragile and hopeful had begun. Wherever you're listening from tonight, thank you for staying with Della and Matthias until the very end. Stories like theirs remind us that even in a world full of judgment, cruelty, and fear, there are still hearts willing to fight for kindness, still hands willing to reach out when everyone else turns away. Your comments, your voices, your presence here mean more than you know. Tell me, what corner of the world are you listening from right now? And if you still believe that love can bloom in unlikely places, that courage can come from quiet souls, then don't leave just yet. The next story will be for you.